Got a dog. An Irish setter. A golden retriever. Golden retriever. He's hilarious. We doing first. Doing this one. Hey, Laura. Are we streaming? We're good?
It looks like it's good. Yeah.
Okay. Let's do it then. You guys ready? Okay, good evening. I'd like to call to order the Special Committee of the Whole meeting, Monday, October 28th, 7 p.m. Laura, will you please call the roll?
Peters.
Here.
Revolt.
Here.
Fonte.
Here.
Foltz.
Here.
Waring.
Here.
Kiesling. Here. And Soretta.
Here.
7 present.
Thank you. Okay, first and only up, Finance and Property Chairwoman Waring.
Okay, so tonight we're going to be going through the budget. We have a lot of the department heads here tonight, so if we have any questions or concerns, they can certainly come up and talk with us about those or say why they may need something that we weren't thinking they needed or something like that. Laura and I talked, and she'll kind of explain over the first page, but there were just some reallocations that happened with kind of some salaries and where different line items go. I mean, for instance, Laura and Shana didn't before used to do anything with council, so now those dollars are allocated towards there. And different places where we have some different allocations to kind of show where the real costs are. So she's going to go over that. And then I've made some notes on some other pages, but otherwise we'll just kind of go page by page, and I'll let Laura take it away.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Like Stephanie said, I want to give a little overview of kind of the process so that you have the background and then some of the things to look for as we go through page by page. I did want to note, Mr. Brian Hill is not here with us tonight. All the rest of the department heads are here. He's out on a water main break, duty calls. So I think a lot of his items, Steve may be able to help us out between myself and then administration. But if you have follow-up questions for Brian, we'll get those to him and get you answers later in the week. So for the budget process, this began on August 27th. We sent all the worksheets out to administration and department heads to ask them to start thinking about their budget for next year and coming up with their numbers. And while they were doing that, the finance department was projecting revenue. So first we start with where we think we'll be at the end of 2019. So we know kind of what we have to start with at the beginning of 20. And then we take a look at revenue projections. Most of our revenues are fairly consistent this year. Income tax looks to be pretty consistent with trends for this year and going into next year. We also base things on employers that we know may be leaving or entering the city based on the news we have. The only real fluctuation in revenue is grant dollars, and we'll see those as we go throughout the budget. We have quite a few grants this year. Any funds that don't have enough revenue to support their operations, which this happens every year with certain funds that aren't general fund supported, then we do a transfer. And if you go to page 19 of your budget, you'll see those transfers. And most of those are pretty typical. The one that was a little out of the ordinary this year was to the Capital Improvement Fund. And we'll talk more about why that is when we get to that particular page, but that's something where we put 30% of our income tax straight into capital every year, but if there's additional needs, then we can always transfer more general fund tax dollars over there to help supplement. So we did project that this year. Obviously, if council makes changes, we can change that around. Fluctuations in expenses a lot of times are driven by capital projects. Then we take it, once we've done revenues, we take a look at expenses. Those are based on two things. One is the department head requests, which you'll see reflected in green throughout the budget. And then the other is things that finance calculates, which you'll see those in purple. So things like salaries, benefits, utilities, kind of our regular costs. When the department head requests came in, the green numbers, finance really didn't cut anything this year. I think administration had already sat down with them and had gone through some cuts. But other than a couple of the large water and street projects, which we'll get to, and they're listed out for you later in the budget, I really didn't make cuts as I went through. So, we'll look at things, and if you feel there's changes that need to be made, we can do that. Finance also goes through and does salaries and benefits. We take it, every single employee, Shanna that's here does that work. We base that on the people that are here currently, what they make, what their union contract says they will make, any stipends or any other things they get. Plus, for our non-union employees, we ask either the mayor and administrator or the president of council to project any raises that they would like to budget for their employees. It doesn't mean that's what they'll get, it's just what they'd like built in the budget. For the most part, raises are about 3%. There's a few outliers of people that got more than that, but for the most part, the unions and the non-unions are 3%, roughly. There's only 2 new positions in the budget this year. There were more than 2 asked for, but some of those, administration did not ask us to put in. Those were set aside. The 2 new positions are 1 administrative specialist in the administration department, and that'll be split between admin, council, and economic development as we go through the budget. Because again, we've tried to really focus this year on splitting people to where they work day to day. And then the other new position is 1 new patrol officer in the police department. So once we've done all the revenues and expenses, the final step is to compare to our fund balance policy. If you remember earlier in 2019, council passed a policy that said that general fund needed to be 25% balance, or the balance of general fund needed to be at least 25% of the appropriations. And right now, with the budget that you have in front of you, we're at 32%. So we meet that requirement. And then that policy also says that we have to have at least a balance in our funds with debt to pay the debt due the subsequent year. So I look at what debt we'll have due in 2021, and for our water, sewer, and capital improvement fund, it needs to have at least that much money projected to be there at the end of 2020. Water and sewer look fine because we have kind of held back some projects. Capital improvement is maxed out. So if anybody tonight would say, oh, we need to add something to the capital improvement fund, we're going to have to take something away of an equal amount because it is right at the max. We could always choose to transfer more money there, but there will have to be some give and take on that money. So that's the basic overview. Like Stephanie said, that yellow note at the bottom of page 1 really draws attention to, although you may see a particular department going up or down in salary, it's not a direct correlation to the number of employees there or what they make. It's just that we've tried to reflect where people actually work. All right, well, we can get started with page 2, is police. There are 2 items on this page that the police chief called me late Friday and said that they had gotten left out in our first round. Those will all fall under the 5201 miscellaneous services. That would be $10,000 for personal protective equipment, including gas masks, and $3,500 for body armor. So we'll have that added in when it comes back to you for a first reading.
Laura, on, and I don't know how you break out the IT, but I just want to make sure I ask, but we had talked in our budget meeting about the network segmentation for the police department.
Yes, that was another thing that he called me on Friday, and that one actually I missed on the first pass, so that will be added in the capital fund, and that was what took it to the max.
Okay,
So
I was out of town over the weekend, so I'm glad that he called you directly, so.
Yep.
Just one question. Well, I don't have many, I know, but, and I say this every year, so when we start asking questions, that's our job. I want everybody to understand that. We're not questioning your integrity or anything like that. Our job is to ask questions. Our job is to know why things are done. That might be one of our biggest jobs, so we're going to ask questions. I do have one, though. When you start looking at this, like miscellaneous service lease, now last year it was almost double, and then this year it's even higher. Why that in the last 2 years did that go so high? And then there's another one there. But
Mark, will you say a
when you
number?
start looking at 5201,
Okay.
that's all these things down here? Okay.
All those fees, and I think we talked about it a little bit last year, is for the,
In the mic.
Okay.
John Minot, Chief of the Police Department. When we talked about that last year, it's for our assurance plan. It's a staggered fee for the equipment for the officers, like the tasers, the body cameras. Recently, over the last couple of years, we've utilized the same plan to put the same type of camera in the vehicles so that it all works together. And also this year, we added additional fees to the Lexipol Corporation that does our policy and procedure manual. They're also doing our rules and regulations, so those are ongoing fees there. The rest is things like the copiers and some of the equipment around the office that's on a lease, the phone recorder.
Okay. All right.
Hey, John, while you're there, I do have a question. Line item 5215, and Pat, does this have anything to do with our upgrade in IT, the telephone?
Well, I'll try to go first on this, and correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, but I think we're trying to budget for, in the event that we're able to figure out with AT&T what the actual charges will be for the remaining copper landlines that the police department feels they need to retain. So as you know, we've switched over to the voice over internet phone system, and as a backup, they would like to have a couple of these hard lines still there for redundancy in the event of a failover. And I think if I recall correctly, in some instances with transmitting data, they need to have certain protocols over, voice over internet phone might not be the right way if they're doing a fax. There's certain stipulations regarding the agencies that they work with and what kind of line it can be transmitted over. So I think that that some of that could be included in there. I'll let.
That number is really just a contingency. Like Patrick's alluding to, there's some lines that are in dispute right now with AT&T as far as what the cost of those lines should be, whether we're in or out of contract. That is being handled by law and administration. And Tim actually has the latest and greatest correspondence from AT&T that we just got in the office today. That currently stands at about $40,000 that's in dispute, so I had to budget something in case we end up having to pay that bill and it can't get resolved.
Okay. All right.
Item number 5230. I look at years back, maintenance of equipment. I imagine we're older, but every year, the last 3 years, that has continued to move higher. Is that anything specific that what is that? I mean, what kind of equipment are we talking about?
Pretty much everything from the cars to things around the office. It's been some of the gear for the guys. We have people on this cooperative SWAT team, crash team, if they need anything unique to their assignment that wears out or needs replaced, it would come out of there. I've even used money out of that to do some repairs around the facility.
Okay.
I have more of a broad question for Laura, but it entails that department, but others. We've said in the past that we would appreciate if you didn't spend everything you don't have to, if you don't use it, you don't lose it, whole mantra.
Right.
So, let's just take the police. How much did they roll over this year and are able to use again, for 2020? Where are we at on that process? Can we see that somewhere?
We can definitely get you those numbers at year end as far as how much everybody kind of leaves on the table. Mm-hmm. That's not a problem. Most people do leave some, and that's part of that process that I talked about at the beginning of where I'm trying to predict now in September and October what will be left at the end of the year. And we always do a little better because nobody spends 100%, but we definitely can do that. I mean, the first two columns on every page are actual, what they spent in 17 and 18, but yeah, if you guys would like follow up on 19 once the year closes, that's absolutely something we can do.
I'm just curious. I'm just hoping that they all realize that they don't lose it if they don't lose it.
Yeah.
Let's keep reiterating that.
Definitely. And for the most part, in the time I've been here, people are pretty good about leaving money there if it doesn't truly need to be spent.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was my only question.
Chief, if I may, have you? I know there was some talk about the vehicles, the the number of cruisers that we're slated to get. And is that on the capital?
That's
not
back
on
in
this
capital.
page.
Capital,
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, we'll get there.
And I think that we did have a question as to what equipment was in there, and that, did you talk with Laura about that as well?
Not today, we did.
Okay, because there was
the
like,
other
I
day.
think you had indicated that when we were in that meeting, Laura had added the numbers up, and they didn't kind of quite come up to what we thought, and you didn't have Sergeant Kemp with you at the time. But you indicated to me, I think, that you were looking at the SRO camera
Radios.
radios, or
We-
SRO radios.
We're maintaining 2 more vehicles now because of the school officers. So last year, we turned over 2 of our old cars that came off the road to them, but they were pretty much stripped of equipment because the new cars coming in have to be outfitted the same across the board. So this year, what I had requested was $170,000 for 3 cars and their equipment. And when we discussed it, we added up the cars and equipment, and I think we came up with 160. But when Frank wasn't there to remind me, we needed the 10,000 was for 2 radios for the school cars.
And the 160 that he's talking about is back on page 29
Right.
in the capital.
And currently, how many officers do we have? And you are asking to add 1, correct?
Yes, I would say historically, when Chief Wilder was chief and myself, and I think even going back to Chief Grimes, we had 17 to cover the shifts, and we were authorized 18. When we put 2 in the schools, we hired 1 more, so it balanced out, so we could only go to 18, and we did not have the authorization through city ordinance to go above 18, nor the funding through the budget, even though the district reimburses us for 3/4 of their salary each. So this year, we, with help of administration and finance, got the ordinance squared away the way we all liked it, and 2020, we would like to have the money in the budget to get to 19, which would get us our 17 on the road that we're supposed to have, and the 2 in the school district.
Thank you.
Chief, the SRO vehicles, those are going to be new or recycled?
Those are our old ones that we pulled from the road,
Okay.
out of service, yeah.
What do we anticipate the service life? So I'm trying to figure out what that cost cycle will be. Is this a recurring cost every 36 months, every 48 months? What do we think we'll see for those 2 vehicles as that requirement moves through our system long term?
Well, I wasn't too concerned about it because we're all, we have that rotation where we replace. So we have the 2 spare cars that we have, plus the 2 school cars. And generally what we do is take a look to see which ones are in the best condition, and that's the ones we would keep, and then the others would go to auction. So the school officers don't drive as much, obviously, they're not round the clock like the road patrol, and the spare cars generally don't get used as much either. So sometimes those will stick around. I think this year we're gonna cycle out that Tahoe, which is probably a 2011 or 12. So once they're retired from the normal patrol duty, they last quite a while.
Okay, thank you.
And the kind of general pattern that PD has used, at least since I've been here, is 2 cars, 2 cars, 3 cars, every 3 years, kind of a cycle. And this is a 3-car year. That's where you're seeing that 160,000.
Chief, question. Do we know, and not that it matters, but, so we recycle every 2 years, it seems they kind of last for the 2 years, and what, 110,000 miles approximately, something like that?
Usually around that, yeah.
So, I guess do you feel like, are other departments in the areas doing the same 2 years? I mean, our cars do look really good. We don't have a lot of travel miles, we're very different than some of the outlying areas. Do we need to have that heavy of a rotation?
Well, what we found over the years is once you get, and that's kind of changed a little bit for the better. When I first started, we bought the whole fleet every year, which, there's more funds available then, but that was
Yeah.
just what you did.
Wow.
And then it changed to buying the whole fleet every other year, so we're getting about 2 years out of all of them. And then some time ago, we started staggering it out like this, and the mileage is considerably higher than what we used to have on them. And once you start getting into the high 80s, low 90s, you start seeing more maintenance costs, and that just continues to rise. And one of the previous generations of the Ford vehicles, we spent almost as much on keeping one of them on the road 1 year as a new one
Well, that's what I
cost.
wondered. Like, had we ever weighed those costs out to say, would a third year be more beneficial as opposed to doing the maintenance?
I think really like 100, 110, 120,000 miles, you're kind of pushing it. And I had spoken with Patrick during our meeting about that. There's a little extra cost to that too, because you not only have the repair costs and you're paying somebody to do it, obviously, but we use all those cars almost all the time. And every time one goes down and has to go to the shop, if we have a full shift, somebody doesn't have a car, or 2 guys are running down to the garage to get one and bring it back. And, so it does impact the operation as well as just the cost.
John, what's our warranty on those? So, like I buy a car for $50,000 for 3 years, they do everything, right? I mean, do we have that kind of thing?
It's $336.
It's
So
what?
generally, the manufacturing defects are covered, but most of the stuff we encounter, those cars work pretty hard, and there's a lot of wear, and, then you run into things like, it sounds silly, but like the seats will break, the
I mean, there's a
adjustment
warranty a lot of times that come to a point where they do everything up to a certain miles, like 50,000
and-
miles.
and
If
then
you walk into a
everything's
dealership, they pay
$1,000.
for it. 50,001, you pay for it. Yeah. So do we have that? Do we go to a different level with?
I think what you're looking at, though, is you're talking about, in a very short cycle, you're putting on 110, 120,000
Right.
miles. You're going to, any manufacturer's warranty beyond the initial, you're going to run that off in 6 months. You're beyond the mileage in a very short period of time.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's what I'm wondering, what it is, because I know mine's like, when I buy, last car I bought, I think it was 50,000. So up to 50,000 or 3 years, I think, or something like that, or 1 year, they paid for everything. I just don't, do we have stuff like that? I've never heard us talk about that, so.
Well, we've had warranty repairs on
Okay.
them, but again, at 36,000 miles,
Yeah.
we have 36,000 miles on them in 4 months. So,
Okay.
Quick question.
Good.
So since it's like short burst of activity, is a lease even an option for these vehicles versus a purchase? Did anybody ever do a comparison? Lease the vehicle versus?
We did a comparison some years ago, and it was not favorable.
Okay, I just was curious because it sounds to me like it could almost be a lease option for you.
Too many miles, yeah.
Yeah.
Way too many miles. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to point out on page 3, similar to what we did last year, we have our school services section that reflects the crossing guard cost as well as the SROs. That's 2 SROs like we had last year. And like the chief said, the school does reimburse the city for a portion of both of those things, but that's reflected in revenue. So this is the full expense of those school services.
So just a note there, so our school services, $261,000 is what we spend on our schools.
Correct.
Okay.
And get reimbursed for a portion.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, page 4 is just what we pay the county health department as a fee. That should stay about the same as last year. So nothing different there. Starting with page 5 and the next several, these are all kind of park department related things. So any questions there, we can talk with Steve.
Just one quick one, Steve, about the pool. I noticed the shade structures. What are we going with that?
And Steve, before you get started, yep.
Oh, say your name, rank and serial number.
Parks, Rec, and Building Maintenance. Steve Shank with Parks, Rec, and Building Maintenance.
Hey, Steve, just pull this up a little closer to you.
Yes, sir.
There you go.
The shade structures were a request of the YMCA. They've got that small eating area right there by the snack shack. And short of the umbrellas and random trees placed throughout the pool area, there is no shaded area for eating. So they were requesting some type of shade. We found those shade structures, I believe they're called shade sails, something we can leave up through the good months. You take them down in the wintertime and would provide them with that for a minimal cost.
Good.
That's a great idea.
Any other questions or concerns? Page 8, the Civic Center.
So page 7, edger for Ventrac, what is that? I looked at that, had a question about that.
Yeah, Ventrac is a piece of equipment we have. Multiple attachments can be put on the front of that. The one I'm asked for this year is an edger, just as your landscaper would come and put an edge along your sidewalks.
Oh, nice.
Normally that's done with a power hand edger. You can obviously see the amount of mileage of sidewalks and curbs that we have, that we maintain just on our properties alone. That would allow us to attach that directly onto the enclosed cab of that. We could start that in the spring, when the weather isn't, as good to be out mowing and doing other things, and start putting an edge on all the sidewalks and curbs on all the city property, allowing us to maintain that a little bit easier throughout the season.
Thanks.
Perfect. I love it.
That makes it look sharp. Let's see. Civic Center.
I do have one question, Steve. The parking lot renovation, Price Park, which one is that? That's not the one that we just put in, the main one, right?
I believe he had it quoted out for both east and west parking lots here on this side. Just the upkeep of it, painting of the lines.
Okay.
The asphalt does need a sealing, just to keep water and everything from getting underneath it, just as the roads do. So,
The new lot that we put in, the main lot, that's
brick on the exterior.
yes.
But we're looking to seal that inside asphalt area.
Gotcha. Okay.
Is there any maintenance we have to do with the bricks, the impermeable bricks?
I do not know the answer to that one.
Because I know every few years we were supposed to do some with the sand, because it's a filter bed, natural filter bed.
Are we talking about parks now, or something else, or streets?
Price Park, the parking lot?
Oh, that parking lot brick?
Yeah, remember where the brick was? That's that
Yeah.
special system we got a grant for.
It looked pretty nice, huh?
We can forward that one on to Brian and see what info he has on it.
So the room divider for Civic Center?
Room divider here is designed to actually sit behind this last row of chairs, just to help with keeping the sound in this direction.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure you guys have experienced a lot of sound issues, just through a lot of your different meetings, and trying to keep some of that sound this direction.
Could we also use it as a true room divider if there were two meetings, or?
Yes, absolutely. It's a portable item, folds up, would fit through these doorways. We'd be able to store it back when we store the dais. We can store it in there as well.
Okay.
But yes, it could be pulled out here and put in different configurations.
Do you feel like if you were using it, you'd be able to hear what people are saying on this side? It's not going to be soundproof, right? It's not like that?
I don't believe so. I haven't seen it personally, other than online.
Okay.
But it is designed, to divide a room, sound-wise. I'm not sure how much it's actually going to dampen.
Well, we wanted to budget something there in the event that all other options fail. Right now, I think with, if everybody uses the microphones properly, it seems to work. We got the fans able to shut off, and it seems to work pretty good. But we thought, well, just in case, we'll budget something there. But if we don't ever need it, it wouldn't be something that we would have to go out and do.
Excellent.
We'll use the microphones. We'll save money. Okay. Any other issues?
One thing
Okay.
that I wanted to bring to your attention on page 9, the top of that page is the Recreation Department, and that was pretty similar to last year, but at the bottom, you see that we have our added line items, 101, 313 for golf course. In talking with administration, when the budget sheets were first sent in from the department heads, there were quite a few items for the golf course that were submitted, but then throughout the process, those things were trimmed out by administration, and what we're left with is the $72,000, which is the projected monthly fee to the operator for next year. We don't have a contract in place currently, so I can't say that that's, all that needs to be there, but at the current time, that's what I had available to me. Because I had a question about that
You mean
prior to the
dividing the
meeting.
72 by 12?
Correct.
Got it, yeah.
Correct. But there's nothing there as far as maintenance, upgrades, any kind of, monies like that.
Okay, Steve, anybody else for Steve? Thank you.
Okay. Laura, anything on 10 and 11 you want to bring our attention to?
Sure, on 10, our building department, you see the main cost there is $480,000. That's to Safe Built for services. That is up quite a bit from this year, but you have to keep in mind that they get a percentage of everything that we receive. So actually for 2019, I'm going to have to bring an increase back to you because as we receive more permit revenue, such as for the Diebold facility, then their costs go up as well. So I tried to forecast that a little bit higher for next year because I think we will have some building projects going on around the city that will generate some more dollars, as well as the cost of the nuisance officer, which we started with this year, but we'll have a full year of
That's
next year.
5225?
Yes. Other than that, the costs there are pretty minimal, just some routine office copier leases and things. And then over on 11, community and economic development, like we talked about earlier, you see some salaries there because we've split some people's time there that may be doing some of those functions that we didn't have in the past. And then the professional services, the 5225 is the big ticket item. That includes our occupancy grants for both Akron Children's and Diebold, as well as some professional services that administration had asked for in relation to zoning and some other services, which Patrick might want to fill you in on.
Yes, thank you. On the, as you know, we did or are underway with, council approved a phase 1 on the zoning code rewrite, and we're moving along with that. We budgeted for that, but should council, after we get that report and all that dialogue and the involvement with the community to help with that, the council, should they decide to go to, okay, yeah, this makes sense, we really like what we see, let's move forward with it, we wanted to budget for that second phase. So this was all talked about when we initially did it, that we were breaking it up this way. And we're not under any obligation to go the full distance, but if we do, we want to have the money budgeted to be able to do it. So.
Patrick, I got a question about that rewrite. I had some conversation with a couple constituents about that. They wanted to know how long is it going to take for us to be able to see the product and then maybe talk about passing it and updating all our rules.
Well, I would say that we, had some initial meetings with the consultant. I think 3 meetings already, and we expect to, have a product to look at in February, and then it'll be up to council and planning commission to coordinate their schedules and figure out what we're going to do next if you're going to move forward.
Would B be the same amount of time frame
Pardon me?
to do the second phase of the zoning?
No, the second phase is more on the implementation side, to be actually writing up all the changes to the code, the legislation. Right now what we'll be looking at are, these are the things that you want to fix. Here's the direction you want to take it from the macro level, breaking it down. Yes, this needs to be addressed. All these things need to be addressed. How do you want to write them up? And then we want to engage them to write them up because it's a very time-consuming process. And our law department is a department of one, and it's just too much for any one person to bear, I think.
So that should help with the DRD, so it jives properly when the DRD's.
Yeah, you really don't, you can't do one without the other. You've got to have the zoning, I mean, just in the initial, looking at the DRDs or master plan or CRAs, the zoning code does not support any of that. So it has to be changed if you
Thank
want to
you.
move forward.
I have a question about the chamber agreement. We haven't seen any updates, so are we planning on keeping that in place? Have you gotten updates? Normally they were monthly, but I haven't seen anything in many months.
Yeah, we receive updates to that. We wanted to make sure that we budgeted for that. And the chamber is working on some concerns that I've expressed with them on making sure that we're getting the most bang for our buck. And so they're working on that as we speak.
So there'll be maybe another contract or slate of services they could provide us to prove the $12,000 worth?
The current contract expires at the end of this year, and so administration would bring that back to council before then to have a more fuller discussion. But for budget purposes, we wanted to include it.
Yeah, I agree. Then how about the master plan? Are we reprinting everything that we've already done, or does this mean we're
No, I
doing
think
something
it.
new?
Yeah, I think it really needs a real look at the initial master plan. As you recall, was done in 2012. In 2015 and 2016, there was some tweaking around the edges, but in essence, it's still the 2012 plan, and I don't think it reflects, where we're at today in 2019.
Excellent.
And I have one more question about the new employee. So obviously they're included in this budget item because we're going to split the wage over 3 areas.
Correct.
Council, economic development, and mayor's office.
Administration. Yeah, in asking administration what that person's duties would be, that's where the split fell out.
Okay. So what would those persons' duties be?
Well, thank you for asking. As you recall, when I came on board, with you bringing me on, administration had 4.5 people. We had a part-time person, and then there were 4. Yes, I have got that correct, 4.5. So what we wanted to do, the intent was to get back to that staffing level. We're not at that presently, and there was discussion a year ago about would the council consider splitting a position with us. And as that has gone on, I believe ever more fervently in that. There's a lot that comes to the administration from City Council for things that need researched, things that need addressed, and one of those principal duties would be to make sure that someone is tasking that, communicating back to the council members, directly with it. Right now, it all falls pretty much on myself or Catherine, and we have a lot of other things that we get tasked with, and it's not always able to get back to you immediately. I get a lot of research requests that is very time consuming. So what we've been doing is, through the course of this year, we were blessed enough to get an intern, as you know, Ben Young from Walsh. He works 2 days a week. But we've been testing out this role of doing research on council things. As you know, he did the sidewalk trees issue on tree commissions. I mean, we've got a lot going that he's able to do, so that's part of it. And then also with administration, maybe working on some tasks that I think need some research that I haven't brought to council yet in that regard. And then a lot of this stuff, ties into economic development. So we're not really looking at the subject matter per se that Councilman Peters calls me up with something that it may not have to do with economic development, but then there are other ones where you or Councilman Revolta called me about an economic development thing. So it was in just describing to the finance director what this person's duties would be, she determined an appropriate split for where those salaries would go.
And the other piece of that, there's part of that role, but then also part of Catherine's salary is here because part of her title is development, if you can read it from way over here on the nameplate, so.
Pat, not that we could ever replace Ben, but we do plan on getting other interns, right?
Well, we'll look to, as it relates to this position, it would be a full-time position, but I am trying to become friends with Ben's friends. And because Ben's friends, at Walsh, they tend to do these intern projects that they're required to kind of not take money for it. That I feel good about that. I don't know about you, but
I mean, it's a great relationship to have with Walsh, to have interns is what I'm really getting to. I think it's something that's vital, and I think we've shown through Ben's wonderful tenure here that it can work really well.
Mark, I have met some of Ben's friends. We'll discuss them in executive session now.
You couldn't keep up with them, though.
I can't keep up with them. But, this sounds as if this is a new position or a new function, but in fact, historically, assistant council clerks conducted research for members of council. So in effect, what we're doing here, what the administration's proposing, is to return that functionality to our side of the charter. And I know that Dee Caduto and Gail many times would run down and prepare packets for me on various issues. I think it is absolutely conducive to better decision making. There's a bigger world out there. And it's good to have somebody free and able to run down and collect, synthesize information for us. And I think what we've seen in Ben, particularly, is his ability to take data and distill it to a 1 or 2 pager, which is great. And I think the quality of the work has been, I think we'd all agree, has been generally high.
No, I think that's vital to have, but if we're going to be paying someone, we better have enough for them to do all the time, not just when we're there to come in. I don't know how much, I don't go in there and ask too many things, but we want to make sure that they've got enough stuff to do at the council side to pay them.
The old retiree does. He's got some ideas for this position.
Okay.
Well, yeah, and I would hope that you would view that in the nearly 2 years that I've been the administrator, that we've brought a lot of things to do. And, we're only limited by the amount of time that we have, and I only have so much time. So I'd like to, step up the game again. It's another step up, and I think when we brought on Kelly Hart and Linda Millis, Kathy Farina, we've each time stepped up our game that we're doing more and more. Ben's working on the rental registration with me to finalize that up so that we can bring that back in a couple weeks here.
Mark, let me give you a perfect example on how I would envision using this position. Mr. DiOrio knows that in his text inbox are pictures of shade shelters at various swimming pools. Now, we've got a guy who's busy, but wouldn't it be nice to make sure that we're not overlooking something, or we have an idea of how maybe the city of Dublin puts their pool programs together, their physical structure. I think, again, we can take it from a very high level to a very granular level to make sure that, we're just have a fair amount of information on decisions. So I'm pretty bullish about it.
There are a lot of projects we just can't get to. There's grants that can be researched, there's more opportunities, there's best practices. We have a lot of things on whiteboards, but we just don't have enough hours to get it all done.
We have to triage it.
Okay.
I don't know if this, there we go. What's also available through the law department is its Westlaw legal research license that we have. We have, I believe with the current contract, availability to have an additional person added on to that. They won't provide it if that person's a paralegal or another attorney, but for another person that not in the legal field, we can make this available, and through some quick training, the availability to do some legal research as well.
I appreciate that, Tim. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? All right, let's go to page 12. Any thoughts?
I would have you note that under publications and printing, that we are anticipating doing 2 newsletters next year.
On page 13?
Page 12.
12, at 15,000.
5226.
Oh, got it.
5226.
And the 3 computers, because Windows 7, just the upgrades?
Yes, we've been working with finance really closely on this, and that has been the get-go from when we first got AtNet in. One of the things that Laura had asked for was, can you take an inventory of what we have and forecast out where are we at with, life expectancy on these devices? What is the average life expectancy? And in this particular case, we are being rushed a bit on the replacement end of this because of Windows 7 is no longer going to be supported after January 1st. And you might not think that means a lot, but what it means is that, as it relates to bugs that infect Windows 7 or people that hack into Windows 7, Microsoft's not going to devote any more resources to trying to prevent that. So those of you that would continue to run that, even at your home, you run the risk that the hackers are going to be out there looking for Windows 7 devices that they could get into, and if they can exploit a loophole, Microsoft's not going to deal with it. So we need to get to Windows 10. Windows 10 requires different operating hardware. So we're upgrading, and you'll see that throughout all the departments.
The life expectancy of most workstations is just 5 years, according to AtNet. And so, and I think, Laura, you asked that question, and yours was just able to upgrade. Yours was only 2.3 years. So that yours met the threshold of being okay to be upgraded. But these particular ones are at the end of life. So putting any money into them to just switch them over from Windows 7 to Windows 10 would be sunk in a year or two needing a new machine replacement anyway. So now it's just the time to do it.
Has AtNet done a projection or a forecast past this year? Or do they just have the things that have to be upgraded for 10?
No, we have a full, complete inventory list of the age of all the machines.
But do
and
they
what they're
have
running on.
kind of it costed out as to what the cost to
I
replace
don't have
those
the
things
cost
will be?
on that. I could add them, get them to add that column.
Okay. That would be really helpful. Then we could start building that in when we're forecasting.
Whose wages and salaries are included since it's such a jump?
That is a portion of the administrator, the deputy administrator, the administrative assistants, Kelly and Linda, and then a portion of that new administrative specialist. So some of that jump is the third of the new administrative specialist, and then some of that jump is just salary increases for those other positions.
So
And
only-
if, at some point, if anybody wants a listing of everyone and what the projections are, I can certainly provide that to you, if it'd be easier to see that way. I know it's difficult when people are split. Trust me, I know it's difficult when people are split 8 different ways. It makes it hard to see.
We should have that. That would
Yeah.
be helpful. That would be a great
Okay,
thing to have.
we can do that. And just keep in mind when I send it to you, it's what has been budgeted. nothing is actually set in stone to the employee until what we call a payroll notice is signed by their administrator or council president or whoever the appointing authority is in that person.
Okay. All right, pages 14, 15. It's you, Laura.
That's me.
What?
Yeah, and the increases in finance salaries are, some of it is increases, you know, as cost of living type things, and then some of it is the difference in allocation. Me in particular, I used to be split 50-50 between finance and income tax, and now that we have Rita, there's not as much time spent on tax, so I've kind of reallocated myself more to finance and then some to council and some to water, since I supervise billing, and then the same thing with some of the other finance employees. One thing that we did notice as we reviewed all those splits, for people like finance or administration, historically a lot of their salaries had been charged off to water and sewer. And while some of that is okay, because we do all do work on behalf of water and sewer, we don't want to push too much there because that's supposed to be used for the water and sewer system. So we've tried to kind of rein
What
that in.
office furniture are you thinking?
We are thinking about, number one, all of our office furniture is circa about 1980 in my department, and we are going to try to move some things around out front in utility billing because of some changes that administration is planning to make on their side with people being in different spots. And then just basic new desks, new chairs, things in the back for things that drawers won't stay shut and just stuff like that.
So this IT managed service, what does that mean?
That is the cost for AtNet to manage all of our servers, backups, internet, all of those things. That's the AtNet cost.
Do we bid that, or is that something that we just?
Well, we already did that.
That was a
Yeah,
bid.
that was that.
The
and it
dark
was not-
web. We did the other week.
It's a professional services
So it just
agreement,
seems like
it's
a-
not bid. And we did the initial bid, a couple years ago on that. This contract went through the same pricing as the year before. So there was not an increase for their cost on that. And, this is not a commoditized product. And I think that's, what we saw before. We were able to get to something that treats all this data and stuff that we have at a very serious level, that we were not getting the right service in for our IT needs. And we continue to go to quarterly conferences on, cybersecurity, what's happening out there, and it's something that it's the world we live in today, that we are never going to be able to get away from it. Now, the downside, a big downside is that as you go through this, and what we find in other municipalities is the same, that if you want to go down that path of bidding it out, you're going down that path of exposing everything there is about your system. You have to let people in order for them to be able to bid. And once they know how to get in, so not everybody that could potentially bid on it would be of upright and moral character.
Okay. I imagine every municipality goes through that. There has to be something better than that. Just because we don't want to have anybody else look at it, we're not going to bid it out.
Well, I think you find that in other communities, yeah. They're doing exactly that, what we're doing.
Okay.
And some hire staff and have on-staff IT services. The city of North Canton has no IT department. So this managed service agreement is more than just backing up servers and backing up data. It's also full IT help desk available to us, technicians 24/7. They're monitoring our networks. They would notify us of a problem. It's a relationship you've built so everyone knows who to call to fix what when, and then they come on site. And then they provide training, new training, onboarding to employees about cybersecurity, ongoing training to us, and as well as all the maintenance of the equipment management.
Okay, good to know.
Mark, I had an opportunity to use the help desk. It was very responsive.
Yeah. I just help this all the time in my work, and they're great. You can understand them, they're the best people in the world.
Pat and Nick did a great job.
Great. Okay,
Good to hear.
just want to know, I don't know anything about it, that's why I'm asking.
What page? Vault Director?
I've had the same experience. I was in quite a conundrum, and once I got the right number, the person called me back, and one of the unique things that they can do, and it's a cost saving to both of us, is the ability to network in and essentially ask the permission to, I'm going to go ahead and you can follow this, and suddenly your cursor is moving and they're typing in instructions, and they say, go ahead and try it, and it works. So it's a positive experience for myself as well.
Okay, anything in law? Page 15.
I'll just note, same story there with the salaries. Much of Tim was charged off to water and sewer, and we're not doing that any longer.
Okay, page 16 and 17.
I have a question for the administration. Do we have some plans to repave or reseal our City Hall parking lot?
We have had discussions on our City Hall parking lot, and what we were looking at is first making sure that we were getting all the bodies to City Hall, moving the engineering, the building department, so we kind of see what our parking needs are.
Okay.
We've had some discussions about engineering working on in-house a parking reconfiguration that could accommodate some additional vehicles. That also entailed taking a couple of the police department vehicles that are on charge and then bringing them here, putting them in the garage at the Civic Center where they could be charged, and then swapped out as needed, and that would free up a couple more spaces. So we're working on that, and we've also talked with St. Paul's about a potential relationship for a couple of their spaces in their west corner of their parking lot. But to answer your question, yes, if we were able to reconfigure, we would be wanting to resurface. One of the things that I looked at as well is, as you know, there's a significant hump in that parking lot. We believe it, if that weren't there, it may configure better. If we were to level that, we've already had Battershell's team out there to look at that, make sure that it would still drain properly and everything. If we removed it, we would need to build a retaining wall, though, up against the Huntington. We had to have the engineer hire a surveyor to look at that property line, and we found that the property line is not correct on what we think. We think that there's some of the land that they're using for their ATM is actually our property, and some of the land where the police department pulls up against the bank might be their property. So we are looking at doing a property swap and straightening that out. So there's a lot to it other than just cracking and sealing. I know I talk too much, but to give you the complete answer.
Good, glad you're on top of that.
Okay.
Looking at ourselves here and policing ourselves here, I noticed we have a 20% increase, but two things that stick out is our salary and wages, and I think that's part of the whole.
That's the reorg plus the administrative specialist, new position.
And there's under professional services, 20,000, where we've never had that in the past. That's something that we should know about.
That is for the court reporter to transcribe the meetings. And I think 20 is probably a little high, but depending on how many meetings we have.
Okay, anything with 18, page 18 and 19? 19 involved a lot of the transfers, if you had any questions with that. think you'll see the 500,000, wait, I skipped ahead, sorry. We can go to 18. Laura, do you want to talk about the transfers? Did you want to say something, Pat, about 18?
I was just going to ask what page you were on.
Oh, sorry, 18 and 19.
Thank you.
Laura, you alluded to the transfers initially.
Yes, and like I said, the transfers to fire and EMS, we do every year. The levies that support those funds aren't enough to support all the operations. And since those are over in their own levy fund, general fund has to support that. The transfer of 100,000 to compensated abs, that's that fund where we put aside money for when people retire or leave. And we have quite a few people who can retire next year. We don't know that they will, but we need to kind of supplement that just in case they do. And then that capital improvement, the 500,000. Year to year, the more capital projects we have, the more we transfer or less. This year, we have one fairly big ticket item in the capital fund, which we'll get to shortly, which is the fire truck. It's not something that's a 25-year life item. So since the day I got here, the fire chief let me know that that was coming soon on the replacement schedule. So I've been kind of squirreling money away in our general fund in preparation for that. So the transfer is to offset that.
Since the day I got here, he's been saying that.
Okay, good. Good, I'm in good company. Thank you.
Okay, so pages 20 and 21.
20 is our income tax fund. The bulk of the money there is for fees to RETA. You'll see that 5225. We pay RETA 3% of income tax up front to collect for us, and then every summer when they reconcile their books, we typically get about 1% to 1.25% back. So we usually end up paying.
And you still really like that
less.
system, like it's been great.
It has been working well for us. We had our subpoena day a couple weeks ago. Well, we had 3 subpoena days. We're in this room, and we had folks come in, and RETA can do a much better job of finding people who are not filing and paying income tax than one employee at the city of North Canton ever could. No shame to her. She did a great job from what I understand, but one person has their limitations, and with the technology they have, they really can help us get every income tax dollar that is due to the city.
Okay. Okay, so the fire department operating fund on page 21, and then we'll have EMS on 23 and 24.
John Bacon, Fire Chief.
You'll see the first of our grants here. It's noted down there at the bottom, about $267,000 for a breathing apparatus. That was awarded from FEMA this year, and it's just an in and an out. They'll give us the money and we'll buy the item.
Is that just, what is that exactly?
The air packs that we put on when we go into it.
Oh, okay.
We're getting all new air packs for everybody. We got a grant to cover the whole thing. Our matching side, I think, was $13,000.
Wow.
So we have to have it into the budget, so next year we can buy it, and then FEMA replaces that money.
Got it. So how many will there be?
42.
42.
So it's really not an expense then. So what you're saying is we're going to get paid back for that.
Correct. We have to expense it and then we get the revenue right back.
Very good.
Any other questions on 21?
Pretty sharp with his pencil,
Yeah.
always.
Then 23.
EMS stuff. Dutch, we got some restrooms that need done. This is in that new area where we
No.
had to add.
It's
no.
in the existing one that was when it was Parks Department. Public restrooms have been there since
Okay.
the Park Department was there. And we're taking the toilets, commodes out, painting, repairing walls that have water damage from before we had the roof replaced, and just redoing that, and then also redoing the offices with the walls that where the front of the building was sided. It also has water damage. And I had Steve over. We're just going to put drywall up and redo those offices.
Okay.
How long do you keep your mattresses?
I think these last ones are 10 years old.
Okay. That was more just a personal question, debate I have going on in my own house, so thank you.
I think the mattress tech people will tell you
I'm
every
not
8
telling you
years
how
you
long.
got to get rid of it. Yeah.
Sleeper or original mattress?
I want to make
Flip
sure
your
you have a
mattresses,
good,
Dutch?
I want them to have a good night's
They,
sleep.
they do flip them, but when you have one shift that has a 200-pound guy and the next shift has an 85-pound or 95-pound guy, and they're not easy on them. They're plopping in them and flying out of them at nighttime, so.
Right.
Good.
Okay.
Next.
24, anything?
Nope.
Well, that's it.
Thank you, Dutch.
We're good? Thank you.
Terrific.
Thanks, Dutch.
Chief Minnick, do you feel bad that he had such a short a time?
Yeah. Different needs, different.
Okay, 25, streets. Dominic, you have to wait to say anything.
Spend.
I know. I think you got it. Did you look on page 26?
I did.
The highest amount of street improvements.
The beauty
I
is,
saw Rob today and I was like, wow, your line item is rather high.
well,
So
we,
if you look on page 26, the bottom, you have a 4 million that was requested for this year and then about 3.3 the year before. So kind of like when Laura and I were saying, Dominic Weiss says streets, but at this point with the capital funds maxed out, something we'll have to give and take, so.
Right, and then also we can look, as we go through these, to page 31, as Laura mentioned, all our grants. We've
Right.
been lucky enough to secure
Right.
for next year.
thanks, Rob.
I had a follow-up if I could. Okay. I'm following this through and near and dear to my heart and some other council members, and I appreciate all the capital that's being allocated towards streets is the Portage Gateway, as we've been known to call it. We had a design that Rob's former employer was very eloquently discussed here in council at a public meeting here at the Civic Center. And I'm looking through the municipal road funds, and I see 125,000, page 26 allocated 5229 for East Maple and Portage repaving. I think on page 30, there's another 125,000. Then also on page 31, there's 462,000. So quite pleased that we have money set aside for Portage there. I'm just hoping it's just not paving, that we are looking at a different project, more of a streetscape project we've discussed, at least to get started with the planning phases of that. I know that road is deteriorated to the point that it's, you know, it's tough to drive.
Right.
And I know we're going to have to do some limited topping or 404 asphalt work, but I really want to look towards any surplus left over this year of any capital projects to really enforce or upgrade a fund for the Portage or West Gateway, so we can start planning for that. So I'd like to have further discussion, not to hold this budget up, but
Right.
I think everyone knows my sentiment. We've talked about it numerous times. I think there's other council members that see the same vision and administration, so that's what I'm looking for, Rob.
Yep, what we have in the budget for next year is to repave the gateway, Portage from Wise at the Corp line, east all the way to the split with Charlotte, and then right at the split, take Charlotte to North Main. And that's a simple repaving with the polymer asphalt. But there also will be in there any catch basin rebuilds, some odd curb and gutter replacement where it's deteriorated, but it's not the full-blown streetscape. The grant that was applied for, actually this one, my predecessor got roughly 5 years ago, and that's just for the repaving portion. And we could certainly look at that. There's some things we're looking at with the Spitzer property to add capacity there and widen Charlotte, and that would, of course, all be streetscape. But as far as nothing that I have in the 2020 budget is reflective of what that public meeting was, where we had the 2 or 3 alternatives. One was
Right.
a roundabout at the triangle there, and some other alternatives that we looked at.
And that's what I'm after. We need to revisit some type of design work for that.
Right.
Obviously, if we're going to pave it, we're not going to come back and
Right.
redo curbs and street lights and sidewalk and things that we want. So I just want to take another look just for this, you might have a grant requirement through ODOT or Public Works, but I think we owe it to look at this and see how creative we can get towards some design work coming in. I'm not saying do the whole corridor.
Right.
But I think we owe it to have a plan in place, start working on it this year, and really look at, do we really need to do all this paving if we're going to revisit this street the next couple of years?
No, I totally agree with you. That's one of the, probably the most busiest access to our community now. And then there's a lot of trucks on it too, and it's dark. And it would be just awful to have that put down and think, oh God, now we're not going to get to it for a while. I mean, I know you're trying your best with that and everything, but we don't need to do it all. We could do like even from, I don't know, Pittsburgh into, pieces at a time where we're putting lights in and we're doing our streetscape that we want to do, and then we can see it coming rather than take this all the way in somehow.
I think that's exactly what we're looking at, and I think the first piece, kind of at the top of our head, is right at North Main, along Charlotte, and the part of that is the old Spitzer property, and what we're looking at capacity-wise there, to take it there and start working outward from the downtown corridor.
Well, let's agree to have further discussion on that this year.
And everything is so unknown of what's going on with Charlotte that, in the future right there, we want to make sure we get that road right, and that's where the road's going to be. But it is an entryway into our community, I think, needs improvement by far. And I think we all know that.
I was just going to say, I think that the main corridor going out towards like Ernie Spike, I think it should start personally off the main drag, heading out, heading east or west. And then we just do it in phases, Because the whole idea is the Main Street district is going to come alive, and we'll just expand out and then make it connected up.
So I don't know, Doug has a lot, threw out these numbers here, because it seems like there's a lot of different numbers that go into that street. I don't know if there's a way we can slice and dice and just do what we need to do until we get this all figured out. But I'd be for that. Let's put it, I know you do a magic, wonderful job, Rob, but we got to figure out something to do that in our lifetime. I would like to see it.
Right. And the way it's showing up in so many places, if we skip ahead to page 31, you'll see item 544 there. That's the $462,000 is the federal money we've been awarded. Then
Page 30 and 26.
Yeah, on page 26.
That was for Portage, that 462, that was for?
Yeah, that was for Portage. We're guessing that the two projects on page 26 will be somewhere around 125. We're going to apply for both of them in municipal road funds. Last year, we applied for just East Hill, and we thought our fair share would be roughly $75,000, and we got almost 203. And I'm hearing rumors that they have additional license plate monies that they'd like to unload. So I've been urged to at least apply for two. And the 125 is just a guess. Maybe it's 250, maybe it's 80. I'm not sure what we'll get. We'll get something, but we're going to allocate it to those two projects. And then the other page where it showed up, I believe, is just our local share. That 462 is 80% of the assumed costs, so we would have 20% as our local match. So we can use the Muni Road plus the other line items that we had in the budget. Page 30, yeah, and the 330 there.
Yeah, Rob, we're jumping all over, but on 30, East Maple Enhancement City Share, what, is that streetscaping?
Streetscaping, yeah, that's what that is. If you look on page 31, up towards the top, the 542, we have $1,524,000 that we have federal SCAPS money, a grant, to pay for 80% of a streetscape out on East Maple. And the limits of that are from Mark Court out to Washington Square. And what that will be is the north side, the sidewalk that's out there on the north, that's going to be removed and reinstall an 8-foot wide sidewalk with some brick enhancements, decorative elements. We're also going to have decorative street lights, And then the Marquardt intersection and the Washington Square signalized intersection are gonna get our typical 4 quadrant brick crosswalks with the big center concrete square. Kind of like the Westgate that we had done a couple years ago.
Similar to what we want to do on Portage,
Similar
to a
to what we
smaller
wanna do
degree.
on Portage,
And why did that one get moved up over Portage?
That one was, my predecessor got that grant a number of years ago, and that's just what he went for back in the day. Again, that one's about 5 years old with these federal monies.
That's probably the most walked. The sidewalk is definitely.
And there's sidewalk there now. I'm not against East,
Oh, I know you're not.
East Maple.
I'm
I'm just saying, we need to find a
That's
place for
grant.
this.
We need to get the same thing going for Portage, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I think the thought process back at the time, after the university came into the city, was to try to make them feel like they're in the city, the employers, the employees, the students, and to draw them to downtown with hopefully the Hoover District someday, and to really attract them, get them downtown with the lights and safe.
No doubt, that's a beautiful area of town, very vibrant with Walsh and Washington Square. I can't advocate enough how important this is to myself and a lot of residents that live on Portage. And not just to pave it and let it go and hope for the best in the future. That's not acceptable to me. I mean, I think we have to put a game plan together now, see what minimum costs we have to use for the asphalt, keep the rest of it, and start building a fund for and a design, and be shovel-ready when other communities don't use their grant dollars that are given to them. So
Right.
it's in reaching distance in a few years.
Right, one of the things you'll also see on page 30, we do have $100,000 in the budget for 2021 street designs. We always try to have our plans ready, like everything that's in here, we pretty much have plans for 20, already done here in 19. So that's one of the things we can gear some of that 2020 design money for the 2021 projects. Use some of that, to see, get that moving.
We won't forget about you, Doug.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
One of the other things I know I'm going to bring up, and I'm squeezing, I know, but I'm really disappointed I don't see anything new for new sidewalks.
Yeah, they have a section in here.
I think there's some in here.
I think they have
Program is that
250.
new sidewalks. That's the sidewalk program. I'm talking about new sidewalks on Glenwood, Lindy Lane, just to start, a road or two that we go to get it started, because if you don't do a little piece every year, it's never going to get done. So that's something that I would like to see, whether it's this year or next year, that we put some money aside and start doing pieces of where we want to put sidewalks. And the sidewalk program is a great program, but it's not getting us where we want to go with the whole sidewalk kind of deal, so.
Well, and part of that money is for the new program, and then part of it is just generally for sidewalks. I believe it was 100,000 of it was kind of targeted for the new program, and the balance, I think it's 50,000, was just general sidewalks. There's also some other money throughout the budget. You'll see concrete repair, curb repair, so some of those things also are sidewalk related.
Well, I'm talking like finishing Lindy Lane, I'm talking about Glenwood, I'm talking about, kind of connecting our walking, our streets that we need to walk to the park and so on. So that's something I would like to see. I don't know what, I think other members have supported that, so.
Yeah, we want walkable spaces.
Yeah. So maybe we can get working on that somehow.
And the place that would need to come from would be the 330 fund, the capital improvement, because levy dollars and things can't be used on sidewalks. So again, if you want to cut something else out and put sidewalks in, or if you want to, prioritize that for 2021,
Rob,
council's choice.
can you get grants for any kind of sidewalk work?
You can, but it's more difficult. I know ODOT has their Safe Routes to School program, but to get that going, you need a walking plan between the school board and the city, and those run like 50,000. So I kind of scratch my head and I'm like, geez, we can do a lot of sidewalk for 50,000 just for a plan. So,
Good,
I mean,
thank
they're
you.
out there, but they're much more difficult to come by.
Thank you.
And keep in mind that we did budget, $50,000 for new sidewalks, and then the other money that we budgeted for the sidewalk program, although we're budgeting the full amount, that may not ramp up fully in its first year, so there would be funds then available that perhaps later in the year, we're into June, nobody's yet ramping up, we may have some additional funds for you there.
And that's great, and I hope we can do that, but we know we get the best price. We can get the bids January and February and create a plan that we, yes, sir.
We should review all of our sidewalk legislation as part of that general discussion. I'm not certain that the language is completely conducive to fulfilling your vision.
Let's change
That's
it.
why we're here.
That's
do
exactly it,
get
but
to
we,
where
we,
wanna
we
get
need to look at it first.
Okay.
Can that be part of the zoning stuff that we're working on?
No, yeah, I think to Mark's point is you're going to want to look at that sooner,
Yeah.
Point. Okay.
and that's easy to do.
And Rob, you're doing a fabulous job,
Yeah,
by the
Rick.
way. Did I tell you that yet today?
No, sir, thank you.
Constructive advice. Look at it that way. Thank you.
Okay, pages 28 and 29.
And Mike's up here, he wants to answer stuff.
No, I'm good. Rob's covering it all.
Standing there, getting
Well, can we skip back to 26, just for one,
26 storm sewer.
Mike, yeah.
is,
Mike Gattershaw, street sewer department. Sorry. Any questions on the storm sewers?
you'll see down there at the bottom, there's that little box of 2 projects that aren't in the budget currently that Rob has planned, Laurel and Ninth and Weber. Again, that was one of those areas where we didn't have enough money to do every project, so those were the ones that were kind of pushed out. If we, do better than we think later in the year, we can always put them back in, or if you'd like to swap things. But you'll see both those projects a few different places in the budget, because there's a storm component, a water component, and a street component.
Right, those are continuations of basically projects we just completed. The Ninth and Weber project is a continuation of where we left off with the Weber reconstruction at 7th. We would take that up past Ninth to the dead end, and then we'd reconstruct Ninth, and that cul-de-sac that's obviously in pretty poor shape. So we'd curb and gutter, storm sewer, and then also that area needs a water line. So there's, in the water fund, when we get to the 651, you'll see a similar box as Laura indicated. So that's one that just didn't quite make the cut. Same with the Laurel. We just, in the last 3 days, paved the Watkins and Laurel, which was a water line project. It came out so well, I'd like to just do it from Watkins south to Linda. That's only 700 feet. Just finish that, get the cast iron water line out with the new one. But again, it's not that costly, but we can fund it from a little bit from 2 or 3 different funds, but we just didn't quite have the funds available in all 3 for this
Rob,
year.
didn't we have grant opportunities for that? For Ninth and Weber?
I didn't submit it for grants. I mean, we can. I didn't think it would score real well because it's basically a dead-end street.
Yeah.
We don't really have much through traffic. So we'll get to a couple other ones that I did submit, which is the 10th Street one and the 652.
Okay.
Rob, is there sufficient stormwater capacity in the Plain Township portion of, as you move Laurel south? That area folds into Plain Township. Do we have enough storm capacity down there that if we start running water,
Yeah, I would take a closer look at that as part of our design.
Okay.
I know the water's getting there now. We have sort of a haphazard storm sewer system there, and with the steep grades
Yeah.
of Linda falling to the west, they're getting it now. Mike's done a lot just this past year with a big section of curb on that north side and basin. So we would look at those calcs, but it is a pretty good-sized storm sewer that's down there in Plain
enough.
Township. That's the one that we've looked at. The dirt would come over the first resident in Plain.
Yep.
And that's a pretty good-sized new system that they
Yeah, it
have.
is.
But before we would pipe water and give it to our neighbors, we would certainly check with their calculations to see if it could handle it.
I got a question for Mike, because I don't want him to feel left out. We're all very proud of the streets, Brick, all those poles and everything like that. You do a fabulous job. What do we got to look at this year? I know that some of those poles are only painted halfway up. Are we looking to finish painting those, some of the light poles in downtown, and how's our bricks holding up? I don't see anything in here for that. That's why I'm asking that question.
Well, back here a little bit in regards to the bricks, Patrick and I have discussed to increase that to have the bricks reset. As far as the poles and the lighting, I'll let John
Okay.
highlighting that a little bit.
I mean, the painting on some of them, some are painted like 3 feet up and then.
The painting that we run into is some safety concerns with our summer staffing that we use at the elevations. We have looked and explored to have that hired out as far as the overhead poles and different aspects. We're still working through that.
Okay.
I know John is working hard to replace them because a lot of them, the paint is covering up the rust. Structurally, they need replacement.
Yeah. And I know last year we had a lot budgeted for new light poles and everything. We didn't use that I know of. I don't remember, but we have plans for that. I know we have that. And
If you go back to page 25.
did I miss something?
Yeah.
bricks and
We kind of
Keep me up to date.
sped by that. If you look, there's brick pavers down there, right here,
Uh-huh.
and the 5227, and then over on the right-hand
So
side
is
at
that
the
what that's
bottom.
for, then, brick pavers for, that's walls, Main Street?
Yeah.
Anything we need?
That's to cover the cost
Okay,
where we
good.
do
Good
have
to
the
know.
retaining walls and the bricks.
And street lighting? Okay.
Yeah, and over on the right-hand side, that's Mr. Hawkinsmith's money. You'll see painting.
Well, that's John's money.
Painting
We could
poles,
get him up.
replacing poles.
Can they
Put him
get
in the hot
powder,
seat.
Okay, we'll get him up here later.
Mike, can they be powder coated? You know, like the poles, I know the ones that we got initially, I think, they seem defective or something. You know, they rotted out so quickly.
I'm going to let John highlight.
Okay, we'll talk about that later.
On the coatings of the poles.
Thanks, Mike.
What page? Staff, what page?
Well, he was gonna talk about the bricks, so that was on 25,
Poles.
the poles, the material on the poles, the rust. Is that what you wanted to know, Don?
Yeah, hey, Mike, so when the poles went up years ago, it seemed like they weren't double coated and they just rotted away quickly. And I didn't know if they were making that right, that we could get a discount on the new poles. Maybe they powder coated them. It looks like it's, what kind of material are those made of? Aluminum cast?
Well, the streetlight poles have just been painted.
Would you state your
with,
name and
Rust-Oleum.
state your name and department title? Talk into the microphone, please. Microphone, John.
Oh, wait, I can only,
Talk into it.
It's on. It's on.
is that better?
Test, 1, 2.
You got my name? Hawkinsmith. John.
So John, I was just wondering about the poles. I know they're replacing them as they rot away, and I didn't know if they were a new product line, powder coated or something that they'll hold up to the salt a little better. I don't know.
Well, they were all powder coated when they were put in, but over the years, we've been painting them with regular Rust-Oleum black paint. And that's why, and they're gonna fade. Even the traffic light poles were powder coated and they're all fading. And we have started a program, still gonna take effect of start painting poles from Marquardt and East Maple, Schneider or Claremont and East Maple are gonna get painted yet this year. Just trying to clean up East Maple a little bit.
So we're on that then.
Yeah. We have money this year, and we have money for next year to continue painting.
This might be for Mike, but this might be out of nowhere because I just had someone, actually 2 people mention that, at least in Main Street here, we have a lot of poles that, like no parking signs and that. It's just those regular poles, and I never noticed it until they said it to me that they're rusted. Just like parking poles, just your regular kind of poles with the holes in them. I don't know what you guys call those. But there's a lot of those that are really rusted. They told me this, so when I started looking, it goes, yeah, there are a lot of those that are rusted. On some of our main streets, do we replace those? What do we do with that? I don't know if that's you, John, or Mike. It's probably a Mike
That would
call
be
on that, but, sorry.
So yes, the last couple of years, we switched the type of pole material to a galvanized metal.
Yeah.
You'll see the ones that are more silver in color, those are galvanized just like a guardrail or any of that type of structure to prolong the rust. Now, the galvanized will, get a brown tint to them over time, but the really rusted steel ones that you see were just regular steel with a light coat of regular paint on them. So as we replace them, as they're hit, they're going up with new material. Now, that will take some time to cover the whole city.
Right, there's got to be thousands of them.
There's thousands of posts out there, and so to go out and replace a rusted post that is structurally still okay would be quite the process.
Right. But I'm just talking about the main streets. I mean, are we continuing to do that? Is that part of anything that we have in our budget? Is it just small enough?
Yes, that is in our sign budget. The sign budget covers all the posts, all the signs. That goes from all the hardware to hold the street signs. Yes,
Okay.
like I say, to replace them, that is in the sign budget.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Okay, pages 28 and 29. So 29 is a lot with the capital improvement fund. Laura, do you want to mention, that's where your police cruisers are, that's where your fire engine is, the speed signs.
Right. So if you guys have questions on any of those items specifically, that's the first half of it, and page 30 is the second half.
I would just mention under the 3 police patrol vehicles that we need to figure out what is the correct number based on the SRO radios. Was there something else on the MDTs, Chief? Or did you already talk with Laura on that? My recollection is that you requested 35, but we're at 30. So I don't know if you can live with that, or where are we? What are the MDTs? Mobile data terminals.
The questionnaire that came back said replace patrol car MDTs 30,000. So that's what I have in.
So it sounds like she put in what the paperwork said. Did we talk about? You've got quotes for 35, is that what you're saying? Okay.
And then the one thing that you don't see on the page in front of you is to add 25,000 additional under 330101 for the network segmentation that you mentioned earlier for the police department. That came in on the sheet, but I just didn't get it on, and Chief brought it to my attention on Friday afternoon.
Any other questions? Okay. Page 31, the Park Development Fund.
Page 31 is all the grants. So the 331 fund up at the top, Park Development, that's the grant that was received for the parks, as well as the private donations or other funds. We budgeted those this year. They haven't been spent, so we're putting them back in again for next year for what we know currently. And then Fund 332, Rob's mentioned a number of those, but that's all the grants that he has applied for on the various street projects.
The only comment I'd like to make is I know we're going to revisit the golf course contract with administration, but I think we need to build a little capital in there as far as the future of the course, whether it's some of the cart paths or some other improvements. I think we've turned the corner with just the course itself being a nicer course and better managed, so let's hope we can find some dollars to do that also. But I'll wait and hear from the administration at a later date on that. I know it's not in the budget now.
Yeah, well, our intent for 2020 is that all expenses related to the operations of the facility will be paid through the cash flow generated from that facility. So we're not looking to put in any money in this budget for, I think it's what, Laura alluded to a little bit earlier about if a stove goes out or a roof on the picnic pavilion needs replaced, or these various types of things, that's going to come out of cash flow from operations. We're not going to be investing any capital in 2020. I think it's important that we focus on making sure that the revenue streams go as projected, and we've been, there's a significant number of eyes and hands on this to make sure that this works out to the city's advantage. And I think, with the requisite skill set on the finance side of the aisle and over here in business on my side, that we're going to try to make sure that we focus on delivering a positive experience with a positive cash flow. And then as we look to 2021, see what we have built up from that cash flow to look at some other projects there.
Try to run it as an enterprise fund, basically.
In essence, that's been kind of the focus here, is that, anything that's generated as an expense from there gets paid from there. And based on, I see, how the facility was run prior to the way it's being run now, I am extremely confident to say to you that this will be a profitable venture in 2020.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, pages 32 and 33. You have the water fund. Any questions?
What's a service van? Do we have a van?
It's actually a large truck. It's probably what is out right now on the water main break, and it holds all of the pieces and parts and tools that they would need to work on a break.
My recollection, it was a 1990s era model, so it's 25 years old.
So it's not really a van down by the river, it's a truck.
It's an enclosed.
Closed vehicle kind of thing. It's not a van.
I wanted to say that, but I'm glad that you did.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay. Page 34 and 35, more in the water operating fund. So 34 and 35 are both.
And 34 is the cost of the water plant, so Mark's here if you have any questions on that.
I have a question on the Glenwood Waterline Phase 2. Where would that be, Rob?
Yeah, that's one that on page 35, in the box there, that we didn't have in the budget, was the Glenwood project we just finished.
Okay.
It went from Lindy Lane clear to Whipple, and that line is an old 14-inch cast line, not in the best of shape. We'd like to continue replacing that cast line from where we left off between Lindy Lane and Donner, take that east up the hill to Hillcrest, and basically eventually chase it all the way back to the water tower.
Okay, thank you.
So that's what that is. We have it in the budget, we're getting it designed, but again, it just didn't make the cut. And I guess we can touch on this. In the box, the last project in the box there, and we talked about it a number of months ago, was the sludge press for the water plant. We submitted back on September 15th the Ohio Public Works Commission grant loan package for that. We'll find out if we were successful on November 14th. What we submitted for, Johnson Controls had it at just under a $3 million project, 2.9 something. So we put in a 50-50 package where we would fund it half ourselves, and then the other half would be a cash grant and basically 25% cash grant, 25% zero interest, 20-year loan. So we'll find out. I think it's scored pretty well, but there's a lot of competition this year. And that kind of has a lot of what we want to do water-wise kind of in limbo. You know, if we get it, we're going to have to scramble and come up with a way to come up with that local match of $1.5 million, so.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Thank you, Rob. And I'll just add that the $1.5 million that's the city share that you see there, I mean, we do have options. We wouldn't have to necessarily pay cash for that and forego all these other projects, but that would be up to council to decide if we want to, you know, seek out, you know, maybe an OWDA loan or some other type of loan to do that over, you know, maybe a 20-year term. And then at that point, we would see how many of those projects in the box could move back into the budget for 2020.
Question for Pat or Laura. When was the last time we had our water towers painted?
It was a few years ago.
Last year.
Yeah. Mark would know that.
Mark.
Mark, come on up. State your name and serial number.
For the record.
Mark Lighthammer, Water Treatment Plant. Yes, the downtown tower here, which is Tower 1, was painted in 2008. And the Tower 2 up at the airport was painted in 2016.
Sweet.
So those big ticket items should be off the table for a while. You should get 15 to 20 years, at least, for a paint job.
Mark, what's this pressure boost for Monticello? That's something that there's issues there or something?
Something we have designed. It's the one problem area we have in the system. Be talking with Brian and I. Anytime we flush more than one hydrant, we go below the 20 PSI minimum. And that's something we worked with Rob too. The booster station is the way to go. We talked about inline booster pumps for each individual home, but we really need that pressure at the main for fire flow. So the booster station is the way to go.
So does that all come from the main tower then downtown? Is that where
Yes, it'll be fed from the
main
feed will be from the tower downtown, but that is just a pressurized system, just like at the airport currently.
And one of the things we're looking at there too is the developer is about to, within the next year, build Monticello Phase 8. And once all those lines are done and tied in and looped the network together, we want to look and see what kind of pressures we have then as well.
Or maybe another tower someday. Who knows?
Yeah.
We won't talk about that now
Yep.
because it'll give us all.
And the 50,000 that's in there is just for a design or a study to see what would be the best solution for that area.
Good to know.
Any other questions? Okay. Page 36
Thanks.
and 37.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
The sewer operating funds.
You'll see at the one capital improvement project on the right, bottom right, 652-779-5501. 10th Street Northeast Sanitary Sewer with the asterisks. I submitted a How Public Works Commission grant, and that's to redo the sanitary sewer from basically where 10th Street Northeast ends at Hoover High School's driveway, and east all the way to North Main Street, or west all the way to North Main Street. And we've got some issues with the sanitary sewer in that area. It's just got some dips and doos and something Mike has to watch with his maintenance. Make sure we don't get any backups or grease jams or things like that. And we'd also reconstruct the road with curb and gutter and completely repave it. It's in pretty bad shape as well. Again, that's another OPWC grant. We looked at 75% grant, 25% local match. So when you see down at the bottom, the total project costs a little over $1 million. And again, we'll find out November 15th. If we're not funded, we'll just roll the money into next year and probably resubmit that grant, dust it off with a 50-50 grant instead of 75-25. That's what we did with East Hill last year. We went 75-25, and lo and behold, we got the 75%.
Nice.
So for next year, if we don't get it, we'll just hold this money take the 2021 budget, and hopefully we're successful next year.
Okay. Pages 38 and 39, the garbage service fund and the insurance fund.
I noticed the leak bag thing at the bottom there. Do we give those away, all of them, every year? Do those go?
They go.
Okay. I mean, it's a nice to do. You have good, nice to do, good to do, must do. I mean, that could cost everybody about $10 for their own bags. I imagine it's because it's a nice thing to do, is why we do it, I take it.
We get a grant for that, though.
We got a grant for that? That's why we do it. Okay. Enough said.
Just gonna say that.
Okay, anything on the insurance fund?
Nope.
Okay.
40.
Okay. Laura, any closing remarks? Or actually, page 40?
40, just agency funds means money in and money right back out.
Okay. Okay.
And then I guess my only closing question for you guys is I have my note that you'd like a listing of all salaries. Do you want that for all employees, union, non-union? Is there anything
should
in
know that.
particular that you'd like to see that we can do, or just you want everybody? Do you want what they make now and then the projection for next year?
Please.
Shannon, got it?
Have Shanna come up here, state your name.
Shanna? Shanna?
Okay. So Jeff, I think we're good with that.
Good to go?
Good to go.
Okay, we will entertain a motion to adjourn out of the budget meeting.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. I'd like to call to order the special council meeting Monday, October 28, 8:46 PM. Laura, will you please call the roll?
Peters?
Here.
Revolt?
Here.
Fonte?
Here.
Foltz?
Here.
Weirin?
Here.
Kiesling?
Here.
And Soretta?
Here.
7 present.
All right, thank you. On to old business, finance and property. May I have a motion and a second to read by title only, third reading, ordinance 72-19.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Tim?
An ordinance authorizing the mayor on behalf of the city of North Canton to enter into a performance bond agreement, the amount of $611,138,000 between the city and McKinley Apple Grove Development Limited for construction of street stormwater management facilities, drainage improvements, and sewer improvements for the sanctuary Phase 4 construction project.
Thank you, Chairwoman Warren.
Okay, we've talked about this a number of times, and probably should have just been an emergency from the beginning, and it looks like they need it now, so that's the reason for the meeting. So if no other questions, I move to pass.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. May I have a motion and a second to read by title only, third reading, ordinance 73-19.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Tim?
An ordinance authorizing the mayor on behalf of the city of North Canton to accept a sidewalk performance bond in the amount of $39,431 between the city and McKinley Apple Grove Development Limited, and accepting the accompanying mortgage deed for the city lot number 6874, thereby securing the bond for all necessary work required to complete the sidewalks in the sanctuary Phase 4 construction project.
Thank you, Chairwoman Warren.
If no other questions, I move to adopt.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. That concludes our agenda. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thanks, guys.
Moved it along.
We're getting better at it every year. I know you used to say that. That's awful.